In the 20th century, the United States found itself embroiled in one of the longest conflicts that the country had ever seen. Beginning with the Korean War in 1950 and ending in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Cold War would shape the direction and character of the American political scene. The increasing socialist influence in Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, and Eastern Europe put a lot of pressure on politicians in America to adjust to the rising influence of socialism on the world stage. This shift can be seen in both political parties and the direction of American politics as a whole. With Reagan in office, the era of neoliberalism had begun in earnest. Reaganomics consisted mostly of things like taking a hands-off approach and just letting the market take its course without all the burden of things like regulation and taxation, because Reagan believed that the market would always, in the end, correct itself. Furthermore, Reagan also championed tax breaks. He believed that by giving tax breaks to the wealthy, they would invest more into their companies and lower their prices so that the positive effects of tax breaks would trickle down to workers and consumers. In order to keep the taxes low, Reagan also believed in austerity, cutting of social programs in order to offset lost revenue by cutting social programs such as Section 8, Medicaid, food stamps, and other community investments. Reagan began making the requirements to receive social services much more stringent, kicking more and more people off of these programs. All of this led to an increase in poverty and wealth inequality. There was also a strike under his presidency, in which he made the drastic decision to fire 11,000 federal air traffic controllers for going on strike. This sent a clear message to the private sector that unions no longer had power in America. On social issues, Reagan used morality and family values to oppress America's minorities, destroying many of the gains brought about by the Civil Rights era. Speaking of, there was also that time that he vetoed the Civil Rights Restoration Act for interfering with states' rights. In any event, the biggest blow to civil rights was Reagan's continuation of the war on drugs started under Nixon. It's no secret that these policies were meant to disproportionately affect black communities. This, coupled with prison privatization and mandatory minimum sentencing laws, may explain why the prison population has increased by 600% since 1974. It wasn't just racial minorities, though. Reagan would take a strong stance against abortion and also opposed the gay civil rights movement, saying, "The gay movement isn't just asking for civil rights. It's asking for recognition and acceptance of an alternative lifestyle, which I do not believe society can condone, nor can I." This is probably why Reagan didn't even acknowledge the AIDS crisis until late in his presidency, when it had become an epidemic. Finally, Reagan ended the Cold War detente of his predecessors and took a more active role in the fight against Soviet global communism. He would bomb Libya and invade Grenada, but the real action would happen under his successor, George H.W. Bush. George Bush the Elder would continue Reagan's legacy by continuing to push for neoliberal policy and interventionism, but nothing is more significant than that under his presidency, the Cold War would officially be ended. The Berlin Wall collapsed in 1989 and created a ripple effect across the socialist world, which sent their governments into freefall. Socialist governments fell in Bucharest, Prague, Ulaanbaatar, and all around the world. Finally, in the early 90s, towards the end of Bush's presidency, the Soviet government in Moscow collapsed. It was official. The Cold War was over. The largest, most prolific socialist experiment in history had fallen. The shocks of the transition to capitalism and a world in which the United States was the sole superpower would reverberate throughout these countries and indeed throughout the rest of the world. In the United States, too, life would never be the same. At the tail end of the 20th century, the United States was now an unopposed bastion of neoliberal ideology, Today, we mostly maintain that status. It's the reality that characterizes our life and indeed the world, though it appears that it may not stay that way forever. Neoliberalism in America is beginning to crumble, with more and more people realizing that this consensus is no longer working for us. Indeed, with many questioning whether the system ever worked for us in the first place, it appears as though our neoliberal ideology may not be maintained for much longer. In fact, even if neoliberalism does remain intact within our borders, China's growth as a global superpower may challenge the ideology's global dominance. Will American neoliberalism remain intact? Will it go the way of the Keynesian ideology which preceded it? How will our conflict with China for the role of global superpower shape the development of our country's ideology? Only time will tell. What can be known right now, though, is that just as the Cold War created our neoliberal consensus, our current conflict with China will no doubt inform our political consensus at home. We'll just have to wait and see what exactly that looks like. While we wait, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this mini-series, and I'll see you next time.